Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning everyone. Hi, I'm Dr. Siti and today we are going to learn about project closure. Just to recap what we have learned so far, we have learned about project planning at the early stage of life cycle project that includes the project planning definition, the importance of project planning techniques, which includes critical path methods and precedence diagram, project crashing, and also earned value management. We also have learned about project monitoring and control that is implemented during the construction phase. The purpose of all these are to ensure that the project can successfully completed, that are on time, within cost, and comply to the quality. So today we are going to learn about project closure, that is the last phase of project life cycle. In order to start with project closure, there are two main questions that you need to ask: whether all project objectives have been achieved, and second is whether the client has accepted the end product. If you find that you have problem to answer any of these questions, then the project closure cannot start and therefore the project may suffer with delay. This figure shows the four phases of project life cycle. As mentioned earlier, the project closure is at the last stage of project life cycle phase. This figure shows that the amount of work and effort are declining and reaches to zero. During this phase, there are important activities to be conducted. Among them are training the operator or technician to use the building, post-project reviews and acceptance of project objectives, transfer documentation, settle and close of financial accounts, terminates or reassign of team members or laborers, and lastly, deliver the final report to the client. The details of this activity will be explained in the next slides. In order to close a project manager has to ensure that all project completion criteria have been met. Project completion criteria is based on project objectives and acceptance by client. For example, what are the client's acceptance criteria? Are they accept the deliverables and product, or do they reject some of the deliverables, or in worst case, reject the whole deliverables due to unsatisfactory of the workmanship? Next, the project manager needs to identify which activities are still outstanding, what are the risks, issues due to the outstanding activity. Next are the release of the deliverables. When all deliverables are completed, the final deliverables can now be released to client, provided that all deliverables meet client's acceptance criteria and clients are satisfied with the deliverables. The next activity is the handover all project documentation to the client for them to keep. Project documentations are material purchasing records, site record, progress record, and etc. Next is to terminate the contract with all suppliers and subcontractors that involved in the project. All project resources, for example, laborers, project team, and other related resources can now be released. The project manager must also communicate with the project stakeholder. Besides then the client, the project manager also must announce the completion of project to local authorities, society that living in the vicinity area of the project, and other parties that positively and negatively affected by the project. And finally, a post-mortem of the project must be conducted among the team members to review the problem that occurred during the project. What steps were taken for the remedy and risk involved? This is called as post-project review. The purpose of this post-project review is to quantify how much does the project has success. Are they meeting the project objectives on time, within cost, and conform to quality? The other purpose is also as a platform to identify any lesson learned for future projects. We proceed to the planning for project closure. In order to close a project, there are some issues that you need to define, identify, and settle first. Client's acceptance criteria, closure kick-off or timing of closure activities, transition needs, resources, roles and responsibilities, and communication. Acceptance criteria means that specific project deliverables, function, scope, and quality need to be firstly defined. Then establish clients' expectations and requirements. This will then form the basis whether the project deliverables are accepted or, in worst case, rejected. Acceptance criteria may also be as measurement for project completion, where specific measurement for each deliverables established by client to measure whether or not the deliverables can be accepted. This eventually will assist client to accept the project. The perfect timing for project closure is also important to ensure that project can be successfully closed. Typically, project closure activities should begin when project deliverables are near completion. This is to make sure that time is not wasted, where transition from construction phase to project closure can begin immediately, and therefore it can effectively manage by maintaining the work momentum and ensure that sufficient resources are available to move on to the next project. The next issue is transition needs. What are the needs or requirements during the transition phase? In order to deal with this issue, it has to be planned during planning of the project closure activities. Typically, transition activity relates to the status of project deliverables. If the project is still under construction, then the project is under the responsibility of project team. Therefore, the project team needs and require to identify in the process of transition. Once the deliverable is ready to be used, it must be transitioned to client and technical operation staff so that the deliverable can be used and maintained. Turnover planning is the planning of resources that involve in the transition phase. This includes training the client's technical and operation staff to operate and use the building. On top of that, planning must be made for preparation of procedural and technical documentation. Project closure planning must also consider the resource requirements, including roles and responsibilities. Since the amount of work is decreasing during project closure, so as the number of resources, the following question helps during planning of resources of project closure. For example, what type of resources will be required for project closure activities? Considering the activities requirement, task, skill, and responsibility. Who will be involved in the project process, including management and the end user, in this case, the client? How will the project team members be reassigned to other projects? And who will be involved in the post-project review process? This is to analyze project results and performance. This is important to determine which resources plus their roles and responsibilities are required during the project closure phase to help in closing the project. As we all know that communication is very important in any phase of project, especially during the construction phase. This is the same goes for project closure, where communication with the team members is required to smooth the project closure and transition. Appropriate steps are required to ensure that all project team have the information on timely basis. Therefore, questions such as, will there be a project closure planning meeting? If so, how many of meeting required and how often? Will it be once a week or every fortnightly. It shall depends on the necessities to conduct the meeting. The next question is what type of documentation will be required to ensure the effective of project closure. For example, financial documentation, project progress document, resource document, purchasing material document, and etc. As a conclusion, having considered all the issues mentioned, we establish a good planning for project closure, and therefore project will likely to complete on time. Next, let's look what are the problems faced by the employees due to the project closure. Most factors are affected when project near completion. This includes the emotional of the employees, which need to be considered during project closure. The employees mentioned here involve staff from contractor and client. For the staff, fear of no future work, loss of interest in remaining tasks, loss of project-derived motivation, loss of team identity. Since most resources may have been reassigned to other projects, the project team may lose some of the members that have been together for the entire project duration. Selection of personnel to be reassigned, reassignment of methodology, the difference in task and method in transfer the staff to other projects may also affect their feelings and emotion. Diversion of effort. The project team will be terminated since project is near completion. Therefore, the task and effort may be diversified for project needs. While the client is affected with the change in attitude due to the project near completion, loss of interest in project, change in personnel dealing with project, unavailability of key personnel. The key personnel involved have been transferred to other projects. For contractors employee, the intellectual effect involve either internal and external. For internal involves identification of remaining deliverables, certification needs, identification of outstanding commitments, control of change to project, screening of or partially completed tasks, closure of work order and work packages, identification of facilities assigned to project, accumulating and structuring of historical data, disposal of unused material. For external, involve agreement with client on remaining deliverables, obtaining required certification, agreement with suppliers on outstanding commitment, communicating closure, closing down facilities, and determination of requirement for audit trail data. The next slide will explain on what are the activities that are required for project closure. In closing of a project, there are few activities involved for smooth project completion. Commissioning. The commissioning means the start and trial use of the end product. In this case, the building. This is to make sure that after handover all deliverables or building to client, the building is functioning as it is expected or intended to be. Main objectives of commissioning is to prove performance prediction, whether or not the building can function as predicted, to pass tests and check of all equipment, systems, machineries, and etc. To search for hazards such as noise, fire, smoke, and other related to the Environment Act and OSHA requirement. In any of this is found, remedial work need to be taken immediately by the contractor. Correction of design. If there is any changes in design during the construction or due to remedial work, design need to be corrected and submitted for approval to the consultant. Training of personnel who will involve in the operation and maintenance of the building and facility. On top of that, the technical support, for example, IT system, equipment, plant, and machineries will also be provided after the handover of the building to the client. Issuance of certificate. In Malaysia, Certificate of Completion and Compliance, or CCC, is issued by the industry professional, for example, engineer or architect, to ensure that the building has been constructed according to its original plans and it is safe and fit for habitation. However, the CCC has the consequences where the responsibility of the project will be changed from the contractor and now to the client. By issuance of the CCC, this means that any remedial work such as repair works due to the negligence by the contractor starts. The next activities is preparing of the project documentation. Documents in this context is the document that were collected and kept from the beginning of the construction phase. The document will then be handed over to the client for client safekeeping. Among the documents are maintenance manual. This document provides the client on the maintenance operation of the building. Record drawing such as built drawing, changes, variation, so on and so forth. Purchase equipment records. This document provides the technical support on the vendor or supplier that of the material, equipment, machineries or system purchased for the project. These also include technical specification, test certificate, and operation manual. Correspondence. This document provides the legal correspondence that were made by all project teams during the construction phase. The purpose is to keep it as a future reference. In closing the project, all financial matters needs to be finalized, where final certificate is issued to the contractor and the contractor are being paid. The project team are also required to prepare a project closure report. In this report, all difficulties faced by project team during the construction phase were listed and what are the corrective action were taken to solve the problems. The report also includes the lesson learned for future project. Disposal of staff or redeployment. During the project closure, it is important to manage the staff so that the staff are motivated and ready for other projects. It is also important to keep the staff fully informed of the situation and future planning of the transition. The project manager is responsible for undertaking each of the activities which were explained earlier and prepare the project closure reports for client's approval. The project is closed only when all activities listed in the project closure report have been completed. Therefore, it is important for the project manager to make sure that all activities are identified and met the client's acceptance criteria. Post-project review, or sometimes is also known as review project completion, is the last activity conducted in the project closure phase. As mentioned in the earlier slides, the post-project review acts similar to post-mortem for the project that able to tell the overall success of a project. This review helps to determine whether the project delivered the business benefit, or in other words, whether the project be able to be used to generate income to the client or met the customer's requirement and remain within scope and budget as originally planned. To determine how well the project performed, the following questions are answered. Did the delivered building meet the project requirements and objectives? Was the client satisfied? Was project schedule met? In other words, was the project complete on time? Was the project completed within budgeted costs? Or was the project complete within the budget? Were the risks identified and mitigated? What would be done to improve the process? This could be as a lesson learned for future projects. Last but not least, the project closure benefit. The output from the project closure phase provides as a stepping stone to execute the next projects, which much more efficiency and control. Therefore, it can be concluded that proper manage the project closure may bring benefits to the client by summarize the project, explains background to project, focuses on key issues encountered, access skills and knowledge of project team, compares what happened with plan related to time and cost, examine how well transition to client was managed. That is the end of today's lecture on project closure. That will be all. Thank you and goodbye. See you next week. Assalamualaikum.